Good evening and welcome to tonight's program on Justice Talks, sponsored by the Sing Sing Prison Museum. I'm Brent Glass, Executive Director of the Sing Sing Prison Museum, and I'm pleased to welcome you to tonight's program. The museum is a nonprofit independent organization. We're directed by a wonderful board of trustees who are volunteers, and we're very pleased that with the progress we're making at the museum. Our mission is to tell the story of Sing Sing Prison, one of America's most famous prisons, 200 years of incarceration with a complex and compelling history. Our mission is also to challenge all of us to imagine a more equitable criminal justice system in America and to take action to build a better society. I'm very pleased tonight to announce that we have received funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities to begin renovation of part of the powerhouse, the former prison powerhouse at Sing Sing Prison. And this is a challenge grant from the National Endowment, very big honor for us to receive this prestigious challenge grant. You'll be hearing more about it over the next several months, but our main challenge, in which we would love your help, is to raise about $1.1 million over the next 3 years to meet this challenge. So you'll be hearing more about it, but I'm very pleased to be able to bring you this news. I'm also pleased to introduce tonight's program in honor of Black History Month, and to introduce Joyce Cole. Joyce Cole is the village historian of the Village of Ossining. She is a lifelong resident of Ossining and attended Ossining's public schools. Her 3 children also attended Ossining's public schools. Joyce received a Bachelor of Science degree in organizational management from Mercy College and a certification in genealogy from Boston University. And it's Joyce's expertise in genealogy that I think deserves a special attention. She has made numerous presentations over the years at the Ossining Public Library, at the Ossining Rotary Club, at the Park School, and also in North Carolina at historic Hope Plantation. And maybe she'll tell us a little bit more about her interest in her connection to North Carolina later this evening. She's developed an interesting program called DIG, Developing in Genealogy, and also DIG Me, Developing in Genealogy Me, which promotes self-discovery through genealogy. And we'd like to hear more from you, Joyce, about those innovative programs. Throughout the evening, you will be able to ask questions through our question and answer option on the Zoom screen. And we will then, after Joyce's presentation, we'll be able to entertain questions from all of you. So please enjoy this evening's program, and please join me in welcoming Joyce Cole.
Hi, Brent, how are you? Thank you for that great welcome. I'm starting the presentation on Black history in Ossining. Black History Month marks a perfect opportunity for us to reflect on the local Black history right here in Ossining. The Black community in Ossining preserved amidst racial boundaries that are woven into the very fabric of American history. From early settlers and migrant escaped slaves to pioneering entrepreneurs, civic leaders, and forward-thinking organizations, our village houses a rich cultural history. Acknowledging the trials and triumphs of our local ancestors paints an accurate picture of who we are and the contributions made to improve the quality of life of not just the Black community, but the Ossining community as a whole. Through my research efforts and conversations with the elders of the Black community, I have unveiled anecdotes of many key figures who deserve to be recognized and celebrated. And I'm proud to share those stories with you today. Slide, please. Okay, can you advance, please, Victoria? Thank you. Our earliest Black settlers of the village did not choose Ossining as their home. These residents represent the enslaved Africans of this area. According to the 1790 census, which was the first US federal census, there were 84 slaves in the town of Mount Pleasant. That's who we were before we were the incorporated village of Sing Sing in 1813 and then Ossining. They were not mentioned by name. They were merely quantified by the number of slaves their owner possessed. And through my research and digging through some records of former slave owners, in the will of Ezra Hunter, I was able to identify the names of 2 of the slaves from his will. Forward, please. Slave woman Paul. I know if anyone's ever seen this before, when you're looking for slaves and you're looking in the wills of the people that own them, you will find them in between things. So Paul was found between giving her away and giving a couch away. Advance, please. And Negro boy John. So of the 84, we're now starting to identify some of the formerly enslaved Africans of this community. From 1830 to the end of 1890, I discovered something pretty incredible. The presence of Black residents, some formerly enslaved, who were landowners and or entrepreneurs. And let's take a moment to look at these individuals. Advance, please. Lewis Brady, AKA Captain Lewis Brady, AKA Uncle Lou. He was born in 1773 and died in 1881. Born a slave in 1773 in Maryland to enslaved parents, Brady's father was a slave of George Washington, and his mother was owned by a neighbor of George Washington. He spent time in Washington's Mount Vernon plantation and remembered the former president's funeral in detail. Brady was the body servant of Colonel Zabriskie during the War of 1812. Upon the colonel's death, Brady was left to Zabriskie's niece. And after some time, her husband wanted to liquidate, and he was going to sell him. And when Lewis became aware of that plan, he ran away, headed towards New York. And after a long journey on foot, Brady reached Ossining, then Sing Sing. In 1836, he purchased a home for $150, equivalent to $4,201.19 today. The picture here is the home that is still there. He lived here with his wife and 3 children. Industrious and frugal, he saved up enough money to purchase a small sloop, a boat, and entered the clam and oyster business. He was a respected man in the community. However, despite this admiration, in a newspaper death notice is stated, Lewis Brady, well-respected character of the Sparta community, has died. It is to be hoped he has gone where all the good darkies go. As Lewis advanced in age, he sold his house to his son to ensure the property would stay in the family, with the stipulation that he and his wife could live out their lives before he took possession. Brady ensured that generational wealth took place in his family, something I did not think I would see in that time period. Advance, please. Another self-made entrepreneur was Thomas Sanford, a mulatto barber who owned his own barbershop in the village. He had a personal estate valued at $500, which can be attributed probably to his equipment and or his shop. Advance, please. Advance, please. He served as a mentor to John W. Hoffman Sr., who migrated to Ossining in 1860. Hoffman opened a small barbershop near the railroad station near Washburn and Todd. Also a member of the U.S. Navy, Hoffman was called to war, the Civil War, on behalf of Ossining. and he lost that shop before his departure. However, upon his return, he remained a fruitful barber for 30 years at several prominent Ossining schools. Advance, please. Mount Pleasant Academy, the Holbrook Academy, and St. John's School. Coined the most famous barber in the nation in 1931 newspaper. He served as barber to some of the nation's most famous military heroes, uniquely blending both of his careers to massive success. Additionally, he would erect a tent at the Camp Woods meeting grounds to cut hair. John Hoffman Sr. was an active member of the community as well as many civic organizations, including the Colored Republican Club in 1891, in which he was a president. Hoffman also remained dedicated to his faith, a first subscriber to Trinity Church. He served as a sexton for over 40 years. And in the late 1800s, he was voted into the Ossining Fire Department as the official bell ringer, the first person to sound the fire notification by ringing the bell. Later, he would assist with responding to fires. He was one of the oldest members of the New York State Firemen's Association when he passed in 1933. Between all of his multiple careers and activities, he proved to be a true Renaissance man. Advance, please. Advance, please. Advance, please. Another important person to note is the famous Sojourner Truth, whose life as an abolitionist and feminist and evangelist began to take shape during her time here in Sing Sing. Advance, please. Born Isabella Bonefree in Ulster County, New York, Truth was emancipated by the state of New York in 1827. She lived in Sing Sing for 3 years as a housekeeper for Benjamin and Anne Folger at a 29-acre mansion bordering Sing Sing named Hart Place. The home was renamed Zion Hill after Prophet Matthias took over ownership of the home and made it the headquarters for his religious following. She went on to work for Elijah Pearson, a follower of Matthias and resident of Zion Hill. In 1834, when Pearson died after eating several plates of blackberries, Folger accused Truth of poisoning them. After the court ruled that Pearson's death wasn't murder, she filed a libel suit against Folger and won. He was ordered to pay her $125. That's equivalent to $2,563.72 today. She also sued a white slave trader for illegally selling her son and won the case. Not only was Sojourner Truth one of the first Black women to take a white man to court and win, she did it twice. Advance, please. Another figure dedicated to his faith was the Reverend Henry Edward Duers. Born a slave in Bertie County, North Carolina, Reverend Duers went on to be an important leader and figurehead in both the church and the Ossining community. Arriving in Sing Sing in 1889 as a missionary, his congregation was formally recognized as an institution of God with the creation of the Centennial Star of Bethlehem Baptist Church in 1890. The original church at 148 Spring Street was built by Reverend Duers with the help of his flock, who laid the bricks themselves. Advance, please. This is the Duers family. Advance, please. And the church that they built. Duers' contributions to the community and this country were immeasurable. He was a Civil War veteran, a sought-after speaker, teacher, curator of essays for publication, mentor, and spiritual advisor to African-American inmates on death row at Sing Sing. A fierce advocate for education as he was denied it in slavery. He demanded equal rights and treatment for all and was not afraid to have an unpopular opinion. This was evident in the case of Howard Scott, a Black man executed in Sing Sing prison. It was customary for the family to claim the body of the deceased, or the remains would be buried in Gallery 25, west side of Hunter Street. Reverend Duers claimed his body and had him interred at Sparta Cemetery. This vexed the community. However, Duers believed that he had made peace with his maker and deserved a proper burial. Reverend Duers has 2 locations in the village named after him. Actually, one in the village and one in the town. Advance, please. He has Duers Court, located in the town of Ossining, and Duers Circle in the village of Ossining. Advance, please. Lewis Brady, Thomas Sanford, John W. Hoffman Sr., Reverend Duers, and Sojourner Truth were just a few of the outstanding figures that ushered in change and advancement in the 1800s and early 1900s. During this time, at the beginning of the century, a new landscape, the Great Migration, further progressed life in Ossining. The largest migration of Black people in the village happened during this time, between 1916 and 1970. This mass movement of Southern Blacks made their way north and west to escape the perils of Jim Crow laws and increased violence. They knew oppression, hate, injustice, and equality all too well. However, they carried with them perseverance, faith, diligence, and a strong desire to move forward despite the challenges they faced. They were former slaves and sharecroppers. However, when we think of slaves, we never put into context that these people were skilled workers. They were midwives, builders, farmers, bricklayers, blacksmiths, expanding their skills into paid labor. In turn, as these migrants carved out new lives and futures for themselves, their children continued to push the Black community forward. And one such case is John W. Hoffman Jr. Advance, please. He is the son of John Hoffman Sr. He is the first Black fireman. He received his education in the public schools of Ossining and later graduated from the Palmer Institute in Ossining. A member of numerous education, business, and civic institutions in the county, Hoffman was a commander of Camp Number 144, Sons of Veterans, as well as a member and president of the Colored Men's Business League. Advance, please. A brilliant violinist, Hoffman taught music in several Ossining institutions: the St. John's School, Ossining School for Young Ladies, Irvin Institute, the Holbrook School, and Mount Pleasant Academy. He taught at these schools for 12 years and held the title of Professor of Music. He was also the conductor of an all-white orchestra called the John W. Hoffman Jr. Orchestra, as well as the Ossining Philharmonic. A sought-after musician for many community events, Hoffman eventually traveled to Europe to share his talents. Advance, please. In 1915, at the age of 40, Hoffman took on a whole new career when he was appointed to the position of Deputy Sheriff of Westchester County, the first Black man in this position. This did not come without challenges. He was the Deputy Sheriff of Westchester County, but he and his wife Blanche were denied access to Croton Point Beach due to a policy not to admit Blacks. Advance, please. They both sued, and they sued separately, $500 each. Advance, please. Blanche W. Hoffman was a force of her own right. She was outspoken and a fierce advocate for women's rights. The most compelling story of her life lied in her genealogy. She claimed and proved to be the heir to the Wendell fortune in 1932. They were real estate tycoons of their time, and Blanche fought to get the money that was owed to her, being their descendant. And the Wendells were a white family. It's really a pretty incredible story, the entire story of Blanche Hoffman. Advance, please. Now that we're speaking of law and the public justice system, Sing Sing Prison is a large interwoven piece of Ossining history. But I want to address a myth. I have been approached many times by people that have expressed that they thought that the Black people came to Ossining to be close to their incarcerated family members at Sing Sing. This could not be further from the truth. In fact, many of the Black people here sought employment at the prison, and a large population of the Black community shared the same street address as the prison, Hunter Street, but they were not in the prison. Carrie L. Stevens was the first Black death house matron hired at Sing Sing Prison for women who were condemned to death. She was appointed by Warden Laws and was revered by the prison staff and community alike. At the request of two condemned women, Mrs. Eva Koo and Mrs. Ann Antonia, on their final walk to the electric chair, she went with them. And part of her position was standing in between them and the audience as the inmate met their fate. After she sustained an injury due to slipping on ice on the prison grounds, she died 8 days later. And her daughter, Natalie Jackson, succeeded her mother as death house matron, also appointed by Warden Laws. Advance, please. In 1953, Natalie served as matron to Ethel Rosenberg. Advance, please. American citizen who along with her husband was convicted and condemned to death for spying on behalf of the Soviet Union. Natalie resided on Hunter Street and can see the prison clearly from her porch. An article of her account of the day that Ethel was executed reads as follows. On the porch of a frame house on the hill near the courtyard sat gray-haired Mrs. Natalie Jackson, one of 4 death house matrons. She was listening to the radio for the latest news from the prison. She talked of Ethel Rosenberg. When I saw her today, she was as calm as ever. She is a quiet one. I've seen 5 women go to the chair, but she was the calmest. The only sentence I heard from her was when she talked about her children. Advance, please. Leroy Smith, after returning from the war, was looking for employment and was approached about an opportunity at the prison. Can you play the audio, please?
When I got home, my mother was taking a night course at the high school, and she met an officer from the Sing Sing prison, and asked him, and he said to my mother, he said, Mr. Smith, he said, how come none of the black fellows ever apply for the correction officers, the state correction officers? Well, I said, my mother said, I don't know, but I'll mention it to my son. So she came and mentioned it to me. I said, well, I'll talk to him. And I talked to this gentleman, and I got an application for the correction officer's job. And when the exam came up, there was 2 exams, one for the police department, one for the corrections officers. So I took the correction officer exam, and they asked about the police department exam. I didn't take that one. I should have, but I didn't. It didn't matter. I think because the correction officer exam at the time, the correctionals were higher pay at the time. They were making more pay than the police were. So I naturally looked for the more pay, so I took that one. And I passed it, and I was married. I got married in between somewhere in
Leroy Smith would work at Sing Sing prison for 25 years, and that is where he retired from. While some migrants created new opportunities through skilled labor, and others flourished working for Sing Sing, there were also those who succeeded in business and finance, lessons taught and encouraged through the Black churches. Advance, please.
When I got home,
Lawrence Thigpen, originally from Cumberland, North Carolina, became a prominent fixture in the Black community due to his wealth of financial knowledge, and he was known as the money man. He taught financial literacy and encouraged home ownership. He helped Black villagers obtain mortgages that were denied by the banks. He would attend the bank and get the mortgage himself, and the Black resident would pay him, and in turn, they would end up with their own home. It has been said that Thigpen was granted access to these services due to his light complexion, and his darker complexion counterparts were not afforded the same standards. His intervention was a calculated plan to circumvent a system designed to prevent home ownership. Thigpen also owned many properties throughout the village, even purchasing the building that is now Full Gospel Tabernacle. He was a member of many civic organizations, including the Negro Civic Organization, Negro Elks, Negro GOP, Golden Agers Club, and the Negro Progressive League, all of which he held positions in, including president at some time during his tenure. His occupation will kind of shock you with all that he knew how to do. He was a janitor at the New York Telephone Company on Main Street, and he would always let the Black community know when new positions came about. He was instrumental in getting the first Black telephone operator, Maud Chambers, her position. As a whole, people like these important figures help strengthen the Black community as they face the adversarial problems of the day. Through the decades, the struggle to gain acceptance, equality, and justice in the village continued. Between 1900 and 1930s, the Black population grew considerably. Small Black communities emerged through the village, particularly in the downtown area, Hunter Street, Secor Road, Ann Street, North Malcolm, to name a few. These communities flourished as they opened their own businesses and built more churches. Advance, please. Full Gospel Tabernacle. Advance. Holy Spirit Church came later. Advance. St. Matthew's Church. Advance. And one of the newer churches, Horak Ministries. The Black church was the center of Black life, and it still is. It was the church that sustained Black people through slavery, Jim Crow, civil rights, and today. It was our first school, the place where we received our validation as human beings, encouragement, and empowered ourselves to face the world to push forward in the fight for equality and justice. The church is where our civic leaders came from. The birth of a rash of civic and welfare organizations were established to care for the spiritual, emotional, and physical needs of the Black community. The church also served as a breeding ground for creativity where our musicians were cultivated. Prominent Black singers, musicians, credit the church for nurturing their love for music, such as, advance please, the National Association of Negro Musicians, the Ossining branch, advance. The Jernigan Singers, a gospel singing group founded and directed by Simone Jernigan McCoy in 1958. The group began as an offshoot of the National Association of Negro Musicians and included members of St. Matthew's Methodist and the Star of Bethlehem Baptist Church. They were all residents of Ossining. The group was not only popular locally, they toured through Virginia and North Carolina to share their talent. Advance. Sonny Chirac, advance. And Ted Daniel were jazz greats who had no examples in this village. They figured out their craft and inspired generations after them in various genres of music, including hip hop. Advance. The Separate Five mentioned their names when they talked about their inspirations. Advanced. However, even amidst the growth, the Black community met resistance as they attempted to assimilate in the larger community of Ossining. There were many social organizations for women in the community. However, they did not allow for Black membership. They gave birth to many social clubs started by Black women. Here we see the Les Bonnes Amies Social Club, meaning the Good Friends, 1949 to 1969. It was an all-Black female social club located in Ossining, and the club was organized in 1949, the year most of its members were married. Looking for extra outside activities, the group, initially 10, decided to visit each other's homes once a week and plan social happenings to benefit worthwhile causes in the community. They remain in existence for 20 plus years, hosting many events, including fashion shows, parties, and annual galas, and attracted hundreds of guests. All proceeds of their events went to local organizations, including the United Fund, the Cooperative Scholarship Fund, Ossining Children's Center and Opportunity Center, Ossining Volunteer Ambulance Corps, St. Matthew's Methodist Church, Full Gospel Tabernacle Church, and Baker Collier Christmas Cheer Fund. Advance, please. The Ossining Recreation had segregated committees that made decisions regarding community leisure programs for residents. The Negro Recreation Committee was filled by African American members of the community with a desire to provide quality leisure programs for the Black residents. They served the Black population only, resulting in segregated events. As noted in several articles, many times the Black events were most successful and well attended than that of their white counterparts. In 1931, the dances that were allowed that followed the basketball games were a community favorite. They were so popular that they would reschedule the date to give more time for the event. However, the added time was not to allow for more dancing. It was to accommodate the time needed to have two separate dances, one for the white group and the other for the Black. In the summer of 1929, the village opened a playground for Negro children on Hunter Street, and the message was clear. Use the playground that has been created for you and not the others. In spite of this fact, the interviewed elders said that they had fond memories of playing with their friends. They talked passionately about the fun at the playgrounds close to their home. When they asked if they took advantage of the other parks, they said no. They played at Snowden Park, Hunter Street Park, and the Hollow. When asked why they didn't explore other parks, they said, our parents wouldn't let us. It was an unwritten rule to stay on our side of town. And one gentleman remembers defying his parents and venturing to play at Nelson Park. And he was met with racial slurs and advised to return to his side of town. This resistance to integration was not a new plight to the Black community. However, they pressed forward. They band together to fight to become contributing equal members of the village. Advance, please. This forced isolation gave birth to many civic and social groups. The Ossining Negro Civic Organization, Ossining Negro Elks, Pride of Ossining, Negro Progressive League, United Front Defense Committee of Ossining, and the Negro Welfare League, just to name a few. Well organized, with large and consistent membership, these groups moved with a purpose. They worked in tandem with each other to effectuate change, addressing issues affecting housing, employment, education, and public safety. They not only addressed race issues on the home front, but championed causes in the South, such as in the case of the Scottsboro 9 in Alabama in 1931. 9 young Black men looking for work got off a train. 2 white girls got off the same train and accused the boys of rape. The young men, who were all under the age of 18, were sentenced to death by electrocution. The civic and social groups here in Ossining took an active role in raising awareness of the case, sending letters to the president, and raising money for their defense. This was no small feat. This was during the time of the Great Depression, when most people didn't have disposable income. Over the next 30 years, the Black community would continue to grow and prosper despite the obstacles they faced, working toward the American dream of homeownership, entrepreneurship, and education for their children. Their dreams were becoming reality despite challenges. Black businesses were booming with salons, stores, restaurants, and sports bars, and home ownership became a reality. The civic organizations would continue to act as fierce advocates for the Black community, meeting frequently with village officials to address matters that affected the Black residents, including membership discrimination in the fire department and issues with the police department, including their unwillingness to hire qualified Black applicants. They created educational programs on topics ranging from politics to health issues affecting Black people. As you can see, our cultural footprint is vast and in-depth. This is just a taste of our rich history. There is a fervent reservoir of anecdotes and inspirational stories that prove the tenacity and spirit of Ossining's Black community. Way more than can be encompassed in this 30-minute presentation. Watching the sons, daughters, and descendants of former slaves and sharecroppers fight for equality and use their skills to flourish against incredible odds is truly inspiring. Fast forward to today. The Black population has decreased dramatically for many reasons. However, the Black community still left here echoes the same sentiment of our elders. They love home, they love Ossining, and they simply want Ossining to love them back. Taking moments like these to celebrate their triumphs and examples is one of the most important ways we can celebrate their legacy. By recognizing the paths forged by our elders in this community and the ways we have built our history, we can continue to build upon the foundations they laid to ensure forthcoming generations a bright future. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joyce. That was just a wonderful presentation. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your research. I will only echo comment on in chat. They said, wow. That was a one-word description of the incredible amount of research that you've done. And before I ask you a question, and we'll now invite our audience to ask questions through the Q&A on your screen. But we have a comment from John Steed, and he said, this historical overview of Ossining is great. My family, the Steeds, my mother's maiden name Geneva Gilliam, are related to the Sharrocks, to the Gilcrests, the Cherries, the Coffers, and more. The Gilliams hail from Windsor, North Carolina, site of the Hope Plantation. And my father, John Steed Sr., was the first Black park supervisor in Ossining. I myself was baptized at the Star of Bethlehem Church, and I was extremely active in sports and arts in Ossining from childhood to my freshman year at Ossining High. Thanks for this great presentation. We've got many other comments like that, Joyce. You really have struck a chord with so many people who are learning about Ossining's history, and I learned a lot from you tonight. I'd just like to ask you, how do you begin your research? What sources do you use to get started, and what questions are you trying to answer when you do your research?
Okay, so when I'm researching, I research as a genealogist. When I start, I'm digging into someone's life. So if I'm reading a newspaper article and I happen to fall on a fact about a family, let's take John Hoffman for example, I'll exhaust as much as I can on articles in the newspaper, but then I build a genealogical tree for that family. And then I start to go into vital records, any resources I can find about them. I'll go into their deeds, newspaper articles, any records I can get. I'll look in old yearbooks. I'm building their whole life, because sometimes I can't get the answers I need and I can't prove it. So sometimes if it's old, I will build a tree from back then bring it all the way up. And this happened in this research, bring it all the way up to someone I think is alive. And then I start looking for the living family to ask them questions.
When you were doing your research on Ossining's Black community, and you grew up in Ossining, and as you did your research as an adult, did your opinions about Ossining change as a result of doing all this research?
Yes. So the first thing that struck a chord with me when I started was I did a genealogy project. Well, I tried to. And my mother and my father didn't know much. So I told the teacher, they don't know. And she pulled me aside and said, there's not going to be much for you, dear. So she sent me to the library and told me to find my favorite animal and write about my favorite animal. So I watched all of my white classmates tell these wonderful stories of their past, and I talked about cats. And that bothered me from that time. And I resigned to the fact that I would never find out my history. So once I started, I couldn't let it go. And so I'm always down a rabbit hole.
You mentioned Trinity Church. Were you talking about Trinity Church in New York City? This is a question that came in.
Trinity Church in Ossining.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And where were the Black neighborhoods in Ossining? Was there just one neighborhood, or were there more?
So the big concentration was in the south end of the village, Hunter Street, Secor Road, Water Street, Ann Street. They were all North Malcolm Street. They all kind of were in that area. Now, there were people that were fortunate enough to get homes and move to the other side of town, but not as much as the other concentration of streets.
Can you talk a little about the integration of schools? Were Ossining schools always integrated?
No, they weren't. So yes and no. It was neighborhood schooling. So if everyone's living on one side of
Okay.
town, you're going to school on that one side of town. So they weren't the whole time. No, they weren't. Am I frozen?
Then we have a question from Jillian McCrae, who teaches at Ossining High School, and we're very pleased that we've been working with Jillian McCrae and also Sam North, who's a faculty member at Ossining High School and a member of our board. And we have a close connection with the Ossining High School and have helped create a criminal justice curriculum. Jillian McCrae asks, far into the present has your research taken you? Do you continue to gather narratives and stories that take us into Ossining's Black present and Black future? What do you see as part of the future? Do you think the Black population will continue to decline in Ossining, or will it stabilize or perhaps increase? Those are a lot of questions, but how far does your research take you?
I'm hearing, it sounds like you're a transformer right now.
Oh.
I don't
Can you hear the question?
hear. I don't. It's me, my service. Hello. I'm gonna kill my camera for a second to see if it's me. 1 second. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Well, I don't know if everyone can hear me, but the question came from Jillian McCrae, who's a teacher, faculty member at Ossining High School.
Yes.
And how far into the present has your research taken, or do you continue to gather narratives and stories about Ossining's Black present and Black future?
So what I'm capturing now is I've been doing oral histories. I'm trying to get as many of the elders as I can get, and also getting the younger folks involved in that as well. I think we have to capture that to figure out what our future is going to be. And I've been changed by what I've been hearing. It just changes your perception of your home. listening to people that are living in the same place, experiencing different things. So do I think it's the population here is going to stabilize? I think that housing issues and the cost of living here is very expensive. So I think that's going to play a factor in how people are able to stay here. I don't think they want to leave home. The sentiment echoes the same with everyone. They love home. They're used to home. I think it's just it's not affordable to stay home.
Here's a question. Joyce, thanks so much for this presentation. It was truly awesome. This is from Corette Perkins. I've done the Ossining Museum in the Street Walk, and not much, if any, of this history is incorporated in it. Is this something that can be done in the future? It would make a much richer experience. And as the village historian, is there something that you plan to do? This is my question. Are you planning to do more to make this history visible?
So two parts to that question. The Historic Preservation Commission, which I sit on as well, is revisiting the museum in the streets and the possibility of expanding on it. In terms of what I'm doing, I have done for Black History exhibit at the Bethany Arts Community that people are able to go and visit. It's 7 rooms of Black history. I am doing oral histories. I'm capturing our current lived experiences, because not only the Black community, but the whole entire community, Hispanic, white alike, capturing what we're going through now, so every voice is captured going forward and not specific voices being captured.
Another question. Let's see. Can you tell us more about segregation in the community? The comment was they were struck by the different parks, for example. Were other facilities segregated, or, for example, were the buses segregated? Did people have to ride in separate sections of the bus?
In my research and in talking to the elders here that experienced this, I remember one particular story that sticks out to me. She was in the choir, and they were going to sing for one of the social clubs, but it was a white social club. And they told them that they can come, but she was not welcome to come. So the group, the teacher decided that they would, decline the offer to go because she was not welcome. Another elder, Black elder that I interviewed, said that there were a lot of diners and that had the counters, and they knew the ones that they were not welcome to sit at. I asked if it was, there was a sign on the door, was it apparent? They said no, there was a lot of unwritten rules around here. It wasn't so blatant, but there were a lot of unwritten rules about, your ability to go somewhere and not go somewhere.
This is from one of our board members. Is there a plaque on the home on Rockledge? And I'll add, I think there are places around the community, and you've mentioned this also about the museum in the street. But first, is there a plaque on the home and on Rockledge?
There is on the house itself, because it's in the Sparta Historic District. So the district is in as a historic district, and it does say the captain's house on it. Mm-hmm.
Is there a plaque to Sojourner Truth and her time in Ossining anywhere in the community?
No, that's being discussed.
I think that's very significant. I really knew nothing about that.
Yeah.
That was really very, very interesting.
Yes.
Here's a question. Has the Black community accepted the Hispanic influx in Ossining? Or how has the Black community?
I can't speak for everyone. I think that it's hard for anyone when a new group comes in and you feel like you're maybe you're not being listened to as much as you were before. Some people are not bothered at all. It really depends on, you know, where they're at in their life and how they're being affected by people coming in. And I think that happens when there's a turnover of any immigration or migration of people.
Well, I think that's all the questions we have. This was just a great program, and I thank you so much. I'm sorry we have some internet connectivity issues. There you are again. Thank you so much, Joyce. It was just wonderful. And we look forward to another presentation. We won't wait a year to invite you back. And we hope that we at the Sing Sing Prison Museum can work closely with you. Your predecessor, Dana White, who is a village historian, is now a Board of Trustees member of the Village of Ossining. She's a member also of the Sing Sing Prison Museum. So maybe by being a member of our board or being village historian gives you a bright political future. But we'll see about that.
Yes, not sure about
I would like to close by thanking everyone for attending. To let you know also that this program was recorded and will be posted on our Facebook page and also on YouTube. I want to thank Victoria Gonzalez, who is our staff at the Sing Sing Prison Museum, who produced this program and makes it possible. It will be March 17th, Women's History Month, and we will have a program on the Mount Pleasant Female Prison, which was actually located at Sing Sing. And for nearly 40 years, there was a women's prison at Sing Sing, and we'll learn more about that Women's History Month on March 17th. If you have ideas for Justice Talks programs in the future, please send them to us at singsingprisonmuseum.org to our website. And we hope you continue to join us and sign up for our newsletter. And we appreciate all your interest. Thanks again to Joyce Cole for a wonderful program.
You're welcome. Thank you.